a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to section 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Section 1. You will hear a woman phoning to inquire about sailing courses. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6 on page 2. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello?
Oh, good morning. I'm calling on behalf of my 13-year-old son, Jacob. He's interested in learning to sail.
Great. Well, we have what we call a taster day on the 22nd of June.
I'm not sure he can make it, but we'll see.
The taster day is on the 22nd of June, so 22nd June has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello?
Oh, good morning. I'm calling on behalf of my 13-year-old son, Jacob. He's interested in learning to sail.
Great. Well, we have what we call a taster day on the 22nd of June.
I'm not sure he can make it, but we'll see. Jacob's really interested, though. So can you tell me about the courses?
OK. We have 2 types of courses for children under 16, 2-day and 5-day.
Could you explain the difference?
Well, the 2-day one just covers basic techniques in sailing. And on this course, the kids always sail with the instructor they've been allocated.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, and the cost is £65.
Oh, I thought it was more than that. I heard it was £125.
That's for the 5-day course.
OK. I presume that course goes into much more detail?
Yes, and from the 3rd day, the kids are given the choice to sail on their own if they want. We use the same types of boat, but we help them learn more techniques, in particular how to manage the boat in a variety of types of weather.
I think Jacob would enjoy that course. Do you give them a certificate if they complete the course?
Absolutely. We give them out on the final day, which a lot of the kids really like.
Great. Could you tell me a bit more about what the children have to bring and so forth?
Well, the most important thing is the clothing. It goes without saying that whatever the time of year, they should have plenty of warm clothes, as it can be quite cool out on the water.
What about footwear? Do they have to wear anything special?
The only rule is that they've got to have shoes of some kind. They mustn't have bare feet.
OK.
And we suggest the kids pack an extra pair of trousers, waterproof ones. They don't have to wear them unless it starts to rain.
Fine. So basically it's just using your common sense.
Yes. Oh, and one other thing we do say is that the children mustn't wear jeans, because they get extremely heavy when they're wet.
Oh, OK.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10 on page 2. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
One thing I forgot to ask is whether it's possible to get a meal anywhere.
I'm afraid not. But we do have a shop called the Marina Stores where he can get a snack.
OK. And before I forget, when I drop Jacob off, where can I park?
Good question. There's spaces near the entrance, but you have to pay for them. But there's no charge for the car park just by the bridge. Do you know it?
Oh, yes, I know where you mean.
Now, we do need you to fill in a registration form. You should send that in a couple of weeks before the course starts. The form is on the website, but we ask you to print it off and add your signature.
Yes, of course. What sort of information do you need?
About your child's swimming ability, any special requirements and so on.
Will you need to know who his doctor is?
Yes.
We've just recently changed surgeries, so I'll make a note to get that.
And one more thing. There's a separate form on the website, which is optional, that asks whether you're willing for photographs to be taken during the course.
Yes, of course, no problem.
Great. So, I'll send you...
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2 on page 3. Section 2. You will hear a manager called Mark Bergin, who works for a large retailer called Johnson Jones, giving a talk at a recruitment fair. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15 on page 3. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning. My name's Mark Bergin. I'm a human resources manager at Johnson Jones, and I'm here to tell you about what it's like working for one of the country's best employers. The company has 225 department stores and owns a further 150 supermarkets. At our latest store opening, we had over 9,000 applicants for 750 posts. So, why do so many people want to work for us? Well, the first thing that attracts them isn't so much the salary, although that is a little above average. It's the idea of getting a massive 25% off everything from washing machines to designer handbags. People are prepared to put in long hours to get those kinds of perks. Johnson Jones has been going strong for nearly 150 years and has outlived many of its strongest competitors. Of course, this has something to do with the high-quality products that we sell and our motto, better for less, which means customers know they are getting good value for money. But we're not alone in that. Where we are different is in our approach to making a profit. Other companies think in the short term, whereas we always take a more strategic view, looking 3 or 5 years ahead. The company isn't owned by a family or shareholders. It's a partnership, which means it's owned by its full-time employees, who are all partners and have a share in the company. In return for the very generous benefits they get, they're expected to put in extra effort and take an active role in running the company. This means they're involved in things like making decisions about pension contributions, for example. Another very attractive reason for working for us is the annual bonus, which we get as a percentage of our salary. Last year it was 15%, about 2 months' salary, which is pretty standard. It can go down to 8%, but that's unusual, and a couple of times it's even been above 20%. Some people use it to pay off loans, others save it for a deposit on a house. The most popular benefit for partners are the subsidised holiday centres, which are owned by the company. Once a year, partners can book in for up to 2 weeks. It's for anyone, from cleaners to directors, with a minimum of 3 months' service. After 6 months' service, partners are entitled to a further subsidy on the cost of their stay.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20 on page 4. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Let me just give you an idea of what's on offer at the holiday centres. The Grange, which is the largest of the holiday centres, is used for conferences by the company, and the board of directors always have their annual meeting there. It's all very informal, not like a normal conference centre. Meadow House is located in Kent, which is famous for its apples and other fruit, and it's a large country house. What's unusual about it is that, unlike other hotels, you have access to the kitchen, so it feels more like staying with a friend. Coombe Manor is a working farm. There are loads of cows and sheep, none of which actually end up on our supermarket shelves. It's a paradise for kids, as there's plenty of space to run wild and also an indoor pool. You can choose to stay in cottages or camp by the lake. The barn is where I recently celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary. You can rent the whole place out for a large group of up to 40 friends. We got all our food delivered from the nearest Johnson Jones supermarket, so there was no cooking to be done. Perfect. All that was missing was the spa, which should be opening next year. The stable is often hard to get into because it's so popular. That's partly because it's right on the beach with beautiful sea views and only an hour by train from London. Ideal for weekends. The company Sailing Club is located there, which was started by the company's founder in 1885. So I'm sure you'll all agree that there really is.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3 on page 5.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Right, now you wanted to organise a formal discussion of some sort in the class, is that right, Daniel?
Yes, we thought it would be really good to end our psychology course with a formal debate. You know, where there's a statement and people argue for or against it.
Good idea. Where did the enthusiasm come from? Have either of you organised debates before? Fiona?
No, but one of my friends did in his last year at secondary school, and he says he got a lot out of doing it. And I know they have debates in lots of other departments here at the university.
I see. So what do you think the students, you and the others, would get out of this?
Well, a debate will encourage people to study all sides of the subject matter. And I also think listening to other people's ideas can have a focusing effect on your own. Sometimes you kind of don't know what you truly believe until you hear something you disagree with.
OK, what about the topic for the debate?
We've got 3 to choose from. We'll show you in a minute to check they're OK. At first, we thought we'd ask the other students to suggest something, but we were afraid we'd get 30 different topics. So instead, we brainstormed some, just the 2 of us, then made a shortlist, and we'll get them to vote for the one they like best.
Right.
But the thing is, if people don't know how debates work, they could feel at a disadvantage. I mean, it wouldn't affect their grades or anything, but it could put them off.
So we thought we should have a meeting beforehand to make sure everyone's clear about what's involved in a debate and how to prepare for it.
I think that's a good idea.
And we thought we could establish some key points of a successful debate there, like that debates are effective methods for considering an issue, and that you need to understand both sides of an argument in order to support one side effectively. We think it'll be best if we can use an issue that the students already have strong opinions about.
Then some people will be happy to speak in support of it and others to oppose it.
Right. What else do you want to do at the meeting?
Well, we've got to think about how people will do the background research for the debate. We could organise everyone into 2 teams. That should save time for the main speakers. They won't have to do it on their own. And we'll need to decide on some rules, like how long each person speaks for, and to select a chair for the debate, someone who's really confident.
Fine. Now, I think you should have some sort of follow-up to the debate. After it's over, I'd like you to get everyone to write a short essay, focusing on what they gain from participating in it. And in turn, that can feed into the work we've been doing on learning and motivation.
But would you be willing to read them and report back? I mean, give some feedback on them.
I wouldn't have made the suggestion if I wasn't.
Thanks.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
OK, now let's think a bit more about the meeting. You need to decide exactly how you'll introduce the students to different features of a debate.
Well, first of all, we need to inform everyone about what actually happens at a debate, the procedures and so on. We could talk about that and write the main information on the board.
Or instead of that, we could make a summary of the main stages and hand that out.
Then talk it through. Yes, OK, that's better.
OK. But we do need to talk about body language as well.
Yes, that's a very important tool. I've got an interesting article on that with some good diagrams of techniques for things like eye contact. I'll make some copies for you to give out.
Great.
Then we need to think about where people will find the information on the debate topic. So they'll need to know where to look for the information. We could compile a list of sources, textbooks and articles and so on.
We could, but couldn't people offer their own suggestions and advice on that at the meeting instead?
Yes, get everyone involved.
Right.
What about preparation for asking and answering questions? We could try to demonstrate that, but I'm not sure how.
Maybe we could put up a list of points on the board. then discuss them.
Yes, that sounds better. Thanks.
OK, well, let's meet up again.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4. You will hear a chemistry student giving a presentation on the color purple and the development of purple dyes. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture to business management students about what managers should do when their organisation faces a crisis. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on page 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I want to talk about how organizations can respond to a crisis, which happens when a serious problem occurs suddenly and must be dealt with quickly. I will talk about a theory that tells crisis managers how to communicate in different kinds of crises. Some people ask why we need theory in crisis communication. Isn't logic the answer? Yes, it is sometimes. But organizations often handle crisis communication badly. What we find is that, in reality, much of the advice that organizations receive on how to respond to a crisis is just a guess. Theory and research allow us to take those suggestions and test them. Then, managers can be given advice based on actual evidence of what works and what doesn't. The crisis theory has categorized 3 general types of crises. One type is a crisis where the organization is a victim and has very little responsibility. For example, this kind of crisis could be caused by a rumor. The second kind is accidental. There isn't much responsibility because there are other outside factors that contributed to it. And the third one, and the most difficult to actually manage, is a preventable crisis. In this kind of crisis, those affected believe strongly that a mistake was made within the organization. The type of crisis is important because the more people think the organization is responsible for the crisis, the angrier they become at the organization. The theory begins by suggesting a two-part basic response that can be used in all kinds of crisis. The first part is to provide information to those affected so that they can protect themselves from further harm. Many crises pose a risk to people. For example, if there is a chemical release, people might have to evacuate an area. Or, if there's a product which could be harmful, people need to be told about it so they don't buy it, or so if they have bought it, they can return it. The second part of the basic response is to communicate the action the organization is planning in order to prevent another crisis. This is important because those affected by a crisis are often concerned that it is going to happen again. Beyond this, crisis managers also have other tools to shape how people think about the crisis. Crisis managers can use several strategies to do this. One strategy is to diminish the crisis. If crisis managers have proof which is convincing, they can argue that a crisis is not as bad as people think. If they can argue this successfully, the harmful effects are reduced. Another way to shape thinking is to give excuses which emphasize a lack of intent. Therefore, people will see the crisis as an accident. This is important because an accidental crisis is much easier to manage than an intentional crisis. Crisis managers can also protect the organization's reputation when there is a major crisis. Their first goal is to reduce the negative opinions generated by the crisis. This can be done by presenting new positive facts and figures about the organization, or by reminding people of past good works done by the organization. Rebuild strategies are useful for preventable crises or when there has been a series of accidental crises, as these crises present a severe threat to the perceived reliability of the organization. For example, a crisis where the organization is clearly at fault or broke a law can be very damaging and can result in loss of business. Rebuild strategies can also be used to reduce the impact of the crisis. To do this, crisis managers say and do things to benefit those affected by the crisis. The reputation of the organization can also be protected in practical ways. The problem can sometimes be addressed by offering an apology to those affected by the crisis. This may be sufficient action when the problem is relatively minor. However, if the crisis is very severe, the most common strategy is to offer compensation to those affected. So, to summarize, crisis communication theory is interesting to managers as it gives positive guidance on how to respond. It can help them figure out which strategy.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.